Okay, it looks like no one new signing on, so we'll kick it off here. So I'm Chelsea Cunningham. I'm the Programs and Peer Review Manager here at SHRF, and I'm going to be talking about the Research Connections program today. First, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm here on Treaty 6 territory, and we have participants here from across the province, hopefully. And it's a pretty gloomy day out today, but holidays are coming up soon, so that's always nice. And so, yes, so we have the Research Connections information webinar today. We're going to be talking about, first a little bit about what SHRF is, about what knowledge mobilization is as the focus of Research Connections, and then a brief overview of the program, eligibility of projects and principal applicants, the application process and review process and criteria that we'll be looking at. And then there's some tips and Q&A at the end if there's any questions. So first, SHRF is our provincial research funding organization here in Saskatchewan. So our aim is to fund, support, and promote the impact of health research that matters to Saskatchewan specifically, as we have kind of a unique research environment here. So we view health research as vital. And this is to improve health of Saskatchewan citizens through a high-performing health ecosystem with a robust culture of research and innovation. And in this, we see SHRF as vital to enabling the best health research that supports Saskatchewan solutions for Saskatchewan health challenges. And we do this through our peer review process, measuring and sharing the impact of funded research, and collaborating with partners to help maximize our impact. So then a bit into what knowledge mobilization actually is. Most of our funding looks at funding actual research activities, but the Research Connections program, we're looking at knowledge mobilization, often abbreviated KMB or called knowledge translation. So this is for sharing the results of research and other knowledge generated from research. And so this is things like synthesis, interpreting or combining findings, exchange between researchers and users, application or implementation, putting research into practice, policy, or action, and dissemination of just communicating or sharing the research results to the audiences that need it. And we do all this with the goal to improve health, the healthcare system, and health service delivery. So the purpose of Research Connections, to tie back to that, is to aim to increase health research relevance, usability, and uptake by supporting short-term targeted knowledge mobilization initiatives. These need to be taking place in Saskatchewan and have practical applications for Saskatchewan knowledge users. Knowledge users is a pretty broad category. This can include patients, healthcare practitioners, other researchers, pretty much anyone that this knowledge might be of use to. And then there is a note on this Research Connections program only supports knowledge mobilization activity applications, which has been in place this year, but is different from previous years. So this program now that does not cover health research related events, such as conferences, academic research days, etc. SHRF does still have sponsorship options if that is something you might be interested in for an event like that. And for this year, with the COVID-19 pandemic still ongoing, activities can include plans for in-person events, given that they're still following public health measure recommendations. But your proposals and budget should address any consequences if it is needed to switch to a virtual event. So the objectives of Research Connections program is primarily to facilitate the sharing of health research knowledge in non-academic mediums and settings. And in addition, you should also be aiming for meaningful engagement between stakeholder groups with the intention of building effective relationships for future health research collaboration. And also be looking at using and integrating health research knowledge and evidence into practice and decision making. And then there's just some examples of what stakeholder groups could look like. So this could be communities, persons with lived and living experience, decision makers, healthcare practitioners, administrators, educators, policymakers, a quite wide group of people. Basically anyone that could contribute to the research that might not typically be on the research team. For the value and duration, we have up to 7,500 available from SHRF, but this has to have matching amounts in cash contributions or a combination of cash and in-kind. So for example, if you want to request the maximum 7,500 from SHRF, you would also need to have another 7,500 in matching contributions from somewhere, making the total cost to complete your project 14,000. And the grant term is up to 1 year for the activity. And I believe our funding start date on this one is the end of March. There's my timeline right there. So yeah, the application deadline is March 1st. So after Christmas, there's some time to prep the applications, hopefully. And then a funding start date for March 29th, and then a 1-year term for the funding. And so we'll get into the eligibility of the program here. So who can apply? We don't have any team requirements on Research Connections. So we just need one person who fulfills the role of principal applicant. And this definition can be found in the SHRF funding guide, but it's basically a Saskatchewan-based team member from one of our eligible Saskatchewan organizations, which I'll get into a bit more in a second, and the principal applicant has to be responsible for all reporting on this application. So eligible organizations include our MOU institutions. So that's the universities, St. Thomas More College, Sask Polytechnic, Saskatchewan Health Authority, Parkland College. And then for Research Connections, we could also take applications from CRA qualified charities, just as long as they are able to provide the financial reporting SHRF requires on the application. And then Research Connections, as I mentioned, there's no minimum team requirements. So co-applicants aren't required, but can be added as needed based on your project. And co-applicants can fulfill one of 3 roles. We have researchers, knowledge users, or persons with lived and living experience. So depending on the project you're looking at, having those co-applicants in place can help strengthen your project when it's under review. And then we have, and then eligibility as it pertains to the actual activities. So the activities need to clearly support the Research Connections purpose and objectives. We want to see that the activity fosters dissemination and exchange of health research knowledge in Saskatchewan specifically. We also want to see that it's based on legitimate and vetted research knowledge. Doesn't have to be your research specifically, but it definitely can be. We also want to see that the knowledge users are identified and the potential benefits from this project to them are described. And we also want to see that it produces timely and concrete deliverables. So the application does require a timeline on that. And then just a couple extra notes there. Principal applicants can submit 1 application per call. In this case, so we have run multiple Research Connections calls this year. So it is 1 per call. So even if you've had a Research Connections previously this year, you are able to apply for this one again. And full requirements are found in the application package. This was a abbreviated version. And so then just some examples of eligible activities. So we have seen things like reports to inform policy at the healthcare level or government level, development of educational resources and translations of text or other resources, outreach activities to connect knowledge users and individuals with the available resources that they might need, such as trying to navigate the healthcare landscape. We've seen compiling perspectives and lived experiences to share their stories and hopefully help others. And developing tech solutions to improve access to resources and care. And so this is not a comprehensive list. So because we always want to see new and innovative ideas. So as long as you can describe your activity and justify it, it will most likely fit, as long as it fits all of these criteria here. And then just touch on the matching funding requirement a bit more. So we do need that 100% matching. So however much you request from SHRF, you do need to have the equivalent amount in cash in matching. And 50% of that should be in the form of cash contributions in some form or another. The other 50% can be a combination with in-kind contributions. Operating grant funding, startup funding, or similar sources are not typically eligible as the matching funds. The exception to this is if the knowledge mobilization activity was identified in the original funding application, and so then has part of the budget allocated for that activity. In that case, that allocated portion of the budget can be used as your matching funding. And SHRF may conditionally award funds if the matching contributions are not confirmed at the time of submission. But so don't let that hold you back from applying, but those matching contributions will need to be confirmed before the release of funds. And then if the funding is not confirmed, the SHRF funds will be reduced to the confirmed matching fund amount. And a bit more on the allowable expenses. So SHRF is publicly funding, so all expenses should be clearly justified and cover only the direct cost and include the cost-efficient options when available. Equipment is not normally an eligible expense. And then the SHRF funding guide is always a handy resource for policies which apply to all SHRF programs, such as if you're looking for guidance on patient honoraria and things like that. And SHRF does reserve the right to partially fund projects, just depending on the budget justification there. So the application and review process. So application is done on the SHRF RMS, similar to our other grants. So you'll need to create an RMS account and log in under your organization. Ensure that the organization you register under matches the organization where you intend to hold the funds. If that needs to be updated, you can send SHRF an email and we can help you out on that end. The application form should be found under the homepage under funding opportunities. And we have a list of some application support information. So we have the SHRF funding guide I've mentioned a couple times, which can be found on the SHRF resources page. There's also an RMS user manual, but maybe more helpfully, there's some YouTube how-to videos with the RMS, which kind of show how to navigate the RMS more clearly than just having it written. And then for the review, and also the application package, obviously, it should be read. And for the review process, so research connections don't undergo a full peer review. So we have an internal SHRF review committee, and the list of criteria for consideration are in the program guide. But it basically covers those criteria I mentioned earlier about the proposal should clearly match the program purpose and objectives. We want to see the knowledge users are identified and potential benefits are described. All of that kind of stuff. And then some final tips for applying. So we do encourage you read the application packages, especially because it contains much more detailed information than what I've given here. The funding guide also has some information on additional SHRF policies if you have questions about what might be allowed and not allowed under allowable expenses, for example. And it always helps to start the application early. So there's no contribution forms required on Research Connections if you're familiar with the SHRF RMS. But any co-applicants you invite will need to log into the SHRF RMS and accept the invitation. So that can sometimes take a bit of time during your application stage. And then also the earlier you start, the more time we have to work through any questions you might have and then make sure everything fits and is eligible expenses. And also think through the budget. So it should clearly reflect your proposal. Anything listed in the budget should be addressed in the proposal. And we also do want to see, so for example, if the majority of your budget is dedicated to an in-person event, we do want to see that there is either a backup planned for those funds or a description of what the event will actually cost if it's switched to virtual. And that helps at the end, so we have some more accountability of where funds went in the case that we had to switch to a virtual event. And then just be clear and precise on the knowledge mobilization activity. So we just really want to know what you are doing and how you're going to do it, and then how it relates to Saskatchewan and the knowledge users that live here. And as always, if you have any questions at all, you can email either me or Tanya is always around to help with the RMS. If you're having any troubles accessing or getting information to show properly, she's always very helpful. And with that, I think that's all I had for today. So if there's any questions, you can pop them in the chat box here and I'll be happy to answer them. And looks like covered everything very well. Maybe there's no questions today, but I'll stay online for a few. Oh, there's one there. Okay. So question, if I have research funds from my university, could those be used to match funds requested from SHRF? So that would be covered under that one point I had on the slides. So if those research funds are specifically allocated for knowledge mobilization activities, they can be matching funds. If they're funds designated for research activities, they can't be used as matching funds though. Okay, and yeah, as I was saying, so thank you everyone for coming on today. I will stick around for a bit longer in case there are more questions. But if there aren't, thank you again for coming so close to the holidays. I know many people are very busy right now. I hope to see some applications from you.